Hello and welcome to Green Shoots. I'm Anisha Nayar Dhawan. On this show, we catch up with startup founders and talk about the genesis, growth, and the future of their ventures. On this show today, I have with me someone whose products many of you must have used, especially if you're a foodie. Please welcome on the show Mr. Shan Kadavil, co-founder and CEO of FreshToHome. Welcome to the show, Shan.
Anisha, it's great to be here.
Thanks so much for being with us, Shan. I actually want to understand, when did you have this light bulb moment of yours and you thought that I must do something to deliver at the doorsteps of customers fresh meat and fish and seafood?
As with most startup entrepreneurs, and I was trying to solve my own problem. That's really when the idea struck us. So, just to give you a little bit of background, my background is I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been in the valley for most of my professional life, and I used to do a bunch of different stuff, different companies in software and others. And then the last job, I used to make games. So I made games like Farmville, Mafia Wars, and so on. As the India CEO for a company called as Zynga. And when I was running the company, I used to buy fish from a venture called Seed to Home, started by my current co-founder, Matthew Joseph. So Matthew used to ship fresh fish. This was in 2011. So it was actually one of the India's first sort of e-grocery ventures from Cochin back to Bangalore and Delhi. The product was really amazing, and I used to be a regular customer. Right? I really like my fish. I'm a from Kerala, so I love my fish morning, evening, and dinner. And during this process, Matthew knew his fish, but the business of e-commerce is a little different breed altogether, and he had to stop operations for some time. And I couldn't get good fish. So the only logical alternative at that point of time, as a foodie, was to go find him, figure him out, and then join hands with him and get the business started on a much larger scale. And that's what we called as fresh to home at that time. So it all started with solving my own problem of not getting good fish and meat, and that led to starting the company. So it was solving my own problem. That was the genesis of the company.
Great. So we're glad that you at least managed to get your fish without any hassles. But how did you start the business? You thought that this is a great idea. You got your fish and you wanted others to get it too. But where did you start? Your friend was already doing this on a smaller scale. Where do you start, and what did you have to build so that this business grows?
So if you look at it from any entrepreneur perspective, right? So there are essentially three things that typically you have to look at, right? The first is there enough of a large market for the idea, right? That's the first part of what you look at. The second is really, is there sort of an unmet need, what investors call as product market fit, right? Something that consumers or whoever is the actor in the system really likes. And the last one is really, what is the unfair advantage you bring to the table, right? These are the three things required to make a business successful. In my case, the first one was really the market was huge, right? If you look at it, fish market or chicken or mutton or the others is a 94 billion US dollars market in India. Now, just to give you put that in perspective, if you take the entire revenue of all the English movies in Hollywood as well as Bollywood put together, or anywhere in that world for that matter, it will still be less than that. So something as mundane as what we think about it, right, as our fish markets or our chicken markets and so on, is actually much larger than making Avengers next movie, right? Just put that in perspective. That's really the size of the market. Then coming to the next equation is that what's really the problem? Now, anybody who's lived in India can actually understand the problem. Right? If you go to a wet market, you'd be horrified at sort of the kind of quality that you get, or sort of what is really happening there, right? Because you know that bacteria can multiply within 30 minutes in any fish or meat. And you would see that if you go to a very wet market, you would see mutton hanging from morning to evening. You will see that the fish is on display with very little eyes. And not just that, this would have been caught maybe 3 days back or 4 days back. So the entire supply chain in a country like India, where supply chain and cold chain is absent, is really the key of the problem, right? It's basically giving consumers a really bad quality produce. And it is also from the other side, because I've spent a tremendous amount of my time, and it's one of the prime reasons for me to start it after two companies in the US, is really if you go to the fishermen and farmers, their lives are quite marginalized, right? If you go there, the supply chain is actually full of middlemen. you will have, and some of these middlemen are glorified money lenders, right? They'll give you 90 rupees in the morning, they'll collect 100 rupees in the evening. That's really the sort of ecosystem that they live in. So, in terms of the unmet need for the consumer, it is actually getting a good quality produce, right? Things that are free of chemicals, things that are free of fish that is free of ammonia or formalin or chlorine. For the chicken, it is no meat without antibiotics and so on, right? And that's where really our brand guideline of 100% fresh, 0% chemicals actually come there. And then for the farmer or the fisherman, it's really all about making sure that they can get a higher price for their product. This is really again something that we do really well, and that takes me to the unfair advantage, right? The third vector in the business, right? So first is the large market, second was the unmet need, the third is really the unfair advantage we bring to the table. So the unfair advantage is really that our platform enables direct sourcing, right? So direct sourcing from at least 1,500 fishermen across the length and breadth of India. And typically, if you imagine this, it's really hard to sort of actually put this in perspective, right? Going to just one harbor or two harbor itself is a huge challenge. Going to about 150 harbors to get sort of 1,500 fishermen across is a tech challenge, right? You can't do it using brick and mortar infrastructure. So we've created a virtual app-based economy where people on the back end, the fishermen or farmers, can actually auction their produce with us. We've done then the same thing and extended it across the India, and then we put together we enable the entire supply chain of cold storage, vehicles, testing, factories, all of that to put together the hygiene that you require, right? So you require product to be always in 0 to 4 degrees centigrade. We call that the safe to home technology, right? Every aspect of the supply chain is maintained in a cold chain. And then we also do enable large scale contract farming, right? We do about 6,000 tons of farming, whether it's fish or poultry or other products. So that's really the crux of the business. Large market, unmet need, and unfair advantage. These are the three things that enable us to be successful as a business. I know
Right.
that's a long-winded answer to your short question. Sorry for that.
Right. But Chan, a number of things that I want to understand here. As a customer, I see the front end of the app, and
Yeah.
you're right. There's a great unmet demand. But to meet this demand, were you confident that you could do it profitably? Because yes, you also eliminating the middleman gets you a good price. So your markup would be good. But what was the metrics you worked with? Was it going to be volume growth? Was it going to be the markup? And Indian customers are very finicky. If they've always done buying meat from the wet market, don't you think they'd be suspicious about the freshness and the quality of something that is being delivered at home? So how did you have any of these doubts? And what was the metrics that you were working with on the customer side of the business?
Yeah, it's a great question. So all of this stuff is actually on the behind the scenes. And the way that we started communicating that is through this really short brand tag, right? 100% fresh, 0% chemicals, and 0% preservatives, right? So this essentially embodied everything that we are doing for the consumer. And then it's really hard for a consumer to make that switch, right? People have been going traditionally to wet markets to buy their fish and meat. And if you look at our growth, about 60% of our users actually come in from word of mouth. Now, multiple different brands use different strategy, right? Some people use a really heavy marketing strategy. We are so confident in our products that our word of mouth is extremely strong. There are two aspects that actually make or break your business, right? The first is really what is your retention of your customer, right? So if a customer comes back today, how often do they actually come back, and how much often do they buy? So we've got about 5 years data, and what we see is that after the sort of third purchase, right? After the third purchase, consumers are typically trying things out. They're actually understanding it. But once we get to the third purchase, we see about 92 to 93% retention. That's probably unheard
Very
of in
high.
this industry. So that's the primary thing we invested in. Then we gave people to try the product. And then once they tried, it got really sticky. And that's really the way that we drove the business. Obviously, after that, we started doing brand and marketing and the others. But really, the product was the brand, right? The consumer's trust was really the big element of the brand that we created. And that led to a phenomenal rise in our orders. And we are now doing close to about a million to 2 million orders, which is between sort of 10 to 15 lakh orders in a month. So it's a phenomenal rise that we've seen thanks to product quality.
All right. So Definitely, volumes are going to be a big growth factor going ahead. Now, I want to speak about the other end, where the you said that the fishermen can have an auction for the produce. But
Yeah.
who's buying here? You're the only buyer, aren't you? Deciding the
We are,
price,
we are the only buyer, and then the
and you're
advantage,
deciding the price, right?
we are not deciding the price. So the way it works is that, assume that you've got auctioning going on, pan India, right? And so we've got, let's say, in Mangalore, a particular fisherman is trying to auction. So assume that the local markets are selling his produce. So let's say he's got prawns, and the prawn is being traded, say, 100 rupees, right? So the fisherman will try to auction with us as 120 or 130 rupees. He will always get a 20% higher. So the markets decide the price. The local markets and the local auctions actually decide the price. He will bid higher with us. And then what ends up happening is that the same 100 or 120, we will get it at a lower price from a different coast, perhaps. Right? So basically, geographically, because the fact that we cut off the middleman and we've got this auctions, which is tech-based auctions, we get an arbitrage there. But it is extremely helpful for the local fishermen. In fact, one of the big things that many investors, for example, the U.S. government or other investors focused on sustainability came to us is because of the fact that we're able to empower fishermen and give them a higher price. And this whole model of an auction, because the price is set by the local market, allows us to give them 20% higher price than the local market. Similarly, we are able to then, in the farming side of things, we don't farm ourselves, right? We enable farming. We give, we enable inputs, that is fish feed or chicken feed or the young fishling or the poultry, and then we give it to the farmers. We also give them micro capital, right? We give them X amounts of money as an advance against that purchase. So essentially, that model allows them, especially rural, in particular, rural employment, and it's a more sustainable ecosystem that we have put together.
Right. So, Shana, I believe your 20% markup to the local price, you would have your intelligence to know what the local price is. I want to understand how you're using technology to streamline things. Of course, in India, you need to invest in cold storage. But does technology make your life easier and make it easier for the farmer and the customer?
So if you look at it just at a high level, right, FreshToHome may have grown, about 4 times in the last 1.5 to 2 years, and and we're doing currently somewhere in the range of about 1,000 crores of revenue on our platform. If you look at it, this kind of a growth cannot happen without technology. And the only reason why you're able to grow is technology. There are essentially three elements of our technology. The first element is our e-grocery stack, right, where we are able to, the app, the front end that the consumer see, and the entire interface, and the whole data warehouse behind that. Then the second one is really what consumers don't see, which is really the auctions and the entire auctions platform. So that's, we talked about that. The last one is really what we call as the safe to whom technology. Now, this is essentially the entire bells and whistles. By using the second platform, uses a lot of AI, because AI is required to predict patterns in auctions and so on. It also uses computer vision, because the phone, because these are like the farmers who are bidding on the platform may not be fully literate, right? So essentially, you have to allow them, the camera on the phone will allow them to understand what kind of fish has come or what species has come, right? So there is a computer vision element there. And then in the last one, we use a lot of IoT devices, right? Because IoT devices allow you to monitor temperature, pilferage, location, and all the other elements required in a supply chain, right? The cold storage. This is from the software side. Then we have non-software technology. Right? We've got a lot of technology to ensure quality, right? Test swabs that allow you to detect ammonia or formalin in field test kits for detecting antibiotics. And we also have a fair amount of technology in aquaculture. We invest a lot in aquaculture and aquaponics, and also in seed pool and those kind of areas as well. So these are the list of areas and technologies that have allowed us to scale this kind of a growth, right, up to about 4x within about 18 to 24 months.
All right. So you've also raised about $150 million in funding. So how do you plan to deploy this capital? You've enumerated for us how, the three boxes where most of your investments are going in, including technology. So going ahead, how do you plan to grow from here on? Where would you be investing the maximum amount of capital?
So we would be looking at it from multiple segments. The first would really be in brand building and sort of marketing, and and then growing sort of through the length and breadth of India. We are planning to be in 56 cities by the end of next year. We're already in about 28 cities. So that's a huge amount of expansion there. We have also a fair amount of international play right now. We are in one country in GCC. We're now expanding to all the countries in GCC and then eventually to Southeast Asia. So there's a fair amount of expansion on that front. And then the last one is really where I am the most passionate about. This is really the vertical integration side. Okay? So we are currently doing about 6,000 tons of fish and poultry. And we want to expand that to a much larger footprint. Fundamentally, I believe that especially India requires injection of a fair amount of technology and organized sort of behavior, especially in fish farming. We have a fair amount of organized behavior in poultry farming. That's actually a very organized segment in India. But fish farming, except for ponds, still are in the early stages. So bringing that will enable rural employment. It will enable food security, and it also gives a huge amounts of jobs. So we're talking about we directly and indirectly currently enable about 17,000 jobs. That's something that I'm the most proud of. We have been recognized by the Prime Minister of India as part of the Champions of Change program for that kind of an effort. And we want to now expand more on that front. So these are roughly the areas where we'll be using the capital.
Great. So, how many cities in India are you present? Do you plan to increase the footprint as well in India?
28 cities right now. We're going to 56 cities in the next 12 months.
Okay. And Shan, did the COVID lockdown prove to
Yeah.
be a big hurdle for the growth of the company since the inception of, and you'd already started growing before COVID happened. But how did COVID impact your business? Was it actually uh, you know a boost for your business?
COVID is actually a terrible time for all of us, right? So it's essentially a pandemic like nothing else. But
Hmm.
from our business perspective, it has been largely positive, right? Obviously, we've had business disruptions and operation disruptions and so on. But COVID has been extremely positive for the business from the sense that uh, the biggest issue or biggest friction that we deal with is what you alluded to, Anisha, is how to get people to try you the first time, right? And what COVID did is to give us a try before you buy kind of behavior to the consumer, right? Because in certain cases of uncertainty of going to wet markets or the hygiene levels and so on, which became very conscious during the COVID time, they tried online for the first time. And that led to a huge adoption curve, right? Because once you try it out, people, consumers really realize that this is really the really hygienic and really much more fresher option because it comes through a supply chain that's just about 24 hours from the time of catch or 24 hours sort of from the source to the destination, right? So that sort of gave them the confidence. And that led to a huge growth for us. So COVID has got plus and minus for us. On a positive side, it's allowed us to grow really rapidly. On a negative side, obviously, we've had a lot of issues with our own friends, family, and FreshToHome employees. So there's a lot of things we have to do in terms of taking care of our consumers, getting the best produce without any COVID concerns, taking care of our employees and our staff, enabling them. One of the things that we are the most proud of is that during the COVID time, we are among the handful of companies which actually gave a COVID hero bonus when everybody else was cutting jobs, right? So this is really a big part of how we see COVID, and it's been largely positive to our business. Anisha, I cannot hear you. I'm sorry, maybe it's an audio issue.
Could you talk about Fresh to Home Daily and the kind of product diversification you're looking at in the years ahead?
Yeah. So FreshToHome Daily is really our foray into figuring out different other categories. So we see two big aspects there. One is that we see that the whole subscriptions business and having to reach the consumers' doorsteps on a regular basis is a really big enabler of frequency as well as adoption of products. So we are trying that out in a different platform. We also see that getting consumers in India, milk is a big habit, is a really good customer acquisition source, right? So essentially, customer acquisition is a really key part of our overall business and trying to reduce that cost. So milk and vegetables are really good ways to getting in to do that. Thirdly, we see that consumers have a much more superior experience through us because we specialize in cold chain, right? We really understand cold chain. And then if you look at the products that FTS Daily caters to, these are milk, fruits and vegetables, and so on, which have to be between 0 to 8 degrees centigrade. And we really understand temperature, right? So compared to sort of any horizontal grocery player who deals with sort of additional categories which are not temperature sensitive, consumers get a much better experience from that. And that's really why we've seen a huge flourish behavior from the FTH daily standpoint. Internally, it gives us customer acquisition source. It gives us an additional muscle that is very critical to our overall business, which is the delivery cost, right? Because if you look at the FTH daily, it's very high density delivery. We will have probably 100 customers in a single building. That reduces our overall delivery cost as well. So it's really accretive for both our business as well as the consumers. It is hugely positive because there is no other player who can actually give vegetables or dairy in a separate supply chain, but with sort of managing the cold chain. That's really the biggest USP we bring to the table.
All right. Shan, last question to you. What's your nugget of advice for entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs watching? Now, you would perhaps have had a first mover advantage, but now there is competition. What should they focus on? Because the journey is not easy. The path is not easy. What should they focus on? Should they focus on volumes, growth, customers, margins? What would you recommend should be the ideal journey for an entrepreneur?
I think the first thing that people should focus on is that most of us spend a lot of time worrying about planning. Right? We think about what happens in plan A, plan B, plan C. Don't do that. Just have a plan A. Don't even forget about a plan B. Just do it, but fail fast. So it's important to sort of try things and move faster, but fail fast, right? So you can't like take 2 years or 3 years to sort of figure out that the business is working or not working. You have to know that within 6 months or a year, right? And then move on, try different things. Failure is a culture that we need to celebrate, right? It's not really especially in our society, we tend to think about failure as really failure, right? As a personal failure. It's really not a personal failure, right? It's just that you're trying multiple things. You'll eventually get there, but you've got to try that quickly. You've got to fail fast and then try the next thing. That's really the culture that will cultivate new entrepreneurs and effectively improve our economy overall.
Right. Thank you so much, Shan, for joining us. And here's wishing you all the best, wishing FreshToHome and its entire team all the best for the years ahead. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Anisha. It's been great to be here. Take care.
So that was a conversation with Shan Kadavil of FreshToHome on green shoots. Keep a track of all that is happening in the startup world on green shoots. Make sure you subscribe and keep watching Green Shoots.